Folks, this is about a poor boy. Just a simple old country boy who had lost everything in the world he possessed. So he had to sell himself to the devil to get out of this awful mess. So he started riding a black stallion with blood-red eyes, flames flying from his nostrils, and called himself the Drifter. The Drifter. The devil rode a big black stallion, traveling in on a cloud of flame. The devil rode a big black stallion, traveling in a cloud of flame. A devil rode a big black stallion. Whoa. Drifter was his name.
To Guitar Radio Show, the show dedicated to the guitar player, guitar maker, gear builder, and purveyors of such items that you may not know about, but should. Here's your host, Mark Davin.
Welcome back to Guitar Radio Show, folks. And I have the distinct pleasure and honor to have somebody on the show that I get to see on a fairly regular basis play here in Austin. And it's a thrill, and I have so many questions for him because when I see him at the shows, it's always just, hey, how you doing? Good to see you. Show was great. And that's usually how it works. So today I've got him cornered, and I'm going to hopefully get all my questions answered. We have with us producer, songwriter. He plays some guitar, he plays the bass, but he's well known for playing the Hammond B3. Mr. Mike Flanigin, welcome to Guitar Radio Show.
Hey, Mark. How you doing, man?
All right, man. It's good to talk to you.
Yeah. It's good to talk to you always.
Yeah. So, I was reading up on you, and I learned some things that I didn't know, like the fact that you've only been playing the B3 since 1990, is it?
Let me think. Well, actually, later than that, I think around 95, maybe. I'm trying to do the math in my head. But, it was probably around the mid-90s. I can't remember exactly when, because in 1990, I think 91, I went out with the Red Devils. I was still playing guitar, and it wasn't until I came back and moved to Austin, really, that I started playing at Antone's.
Right, it was that B3 that was sitting there at Guadalupe, right?
Yeah, they just had the Antone's B3 on stage. So I was playing guitar with Johnny Muller. We were the two guitar players, and we used to do. I think this was when Derek Obrien had gone away to prison, so we were the Blue Monday band for a little bit, and but anyway, they had the B3 there on stage, and I just decided that it'd be fun to try and play it. I mean, Johnny's a great guitar player. I thought, well, maybe I'll try and play the B3, and so that's kind of how it started. I mean, I didn't know how to play keyboards or anything. I just
kind of blows my mind.
Well, it was funny because they part of that, at that time also I was into steel guitar. Like straight steel, not pedal steel.
Right.
And so I was playing that. I was real into Hop Wilson, the blues steel guitar player from Houston.
Yeah.
So I was really trying, kind of investigating that, and I was really obsessed with Hop Wilson. And so I would play that on that gig some. And one of the things I did was there was a Big John Patton song called Let 'Em Roll that I loved, and I used to play that. I'd play the steel through like a flanger or something, try and get it to sound like a Leslie, and I would play the organ parts, right?
I gotcha.
On the steel, and so I would do it right next to the B3. The B3 was sitting right there, and I think I just put two and two together, and I thought, why am I trying to play B3 on this steel through a flanger when there's a B3 sitting right there? That seems ridiculous. So I think that pushed me to try to do it,
Yeah. It's pretty crazy. I recently brought a cousin from East Coast over to come see you play. He's a musician, and he was marveling at the fact that you wear cowboy boots and use the pedals on the B3.
Oh, right. Yeah, sometimes it's funny. I remember that, there's students, they have a huge pipe organ at the University of Texas, and of course they have students that are majoring in that, and they're amazing pipe organists, and of course they wear, I think, these little special socks or little booties when they play, because they're really covering a lot of pedals,
right?
And so they would come out. This has been a while ago, but I used to have a little group of them would come out, and then they would always laugh about that, like, how can you play the pedals in cowboy boots? But the truth is that if you look at any of the great jazz organ players playing pedals, all of them, I mean, Jimmy Smith or John Patton or Jack McDuff and Jimmy McGriff, I got to see all those guys. They all played in shoes. They all played in dress shoes.
Yeah, yeah. It's
the same thing. It gives you a different. There are people that play in socks and stuff. Jazz organists like Rhoda Scott. I think she plays in her bare feet. I could never do that. There's a certain slap you get with a hard sole on the bass pedals that you need. In my mind, it makes it easier with hard soles on.
That's interesting. I would have thought quite the opposite. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people do it in socks, and I always think it looks really hard to do it in socks because you can't get the slides. There's a lot of sliding that goes on. And the thing about the bass pedals is you can't do huge jumps. I mean, Wild Bill Davis was the guy that came up with the left-hand bass on the lower manual and the foot combination, between those two things. And of course, also they did guys like Milt Buckner. He just played all foot. But if you're playing all foot on the pedals, your bass lines are really chromatic. I mean, things have to be close. You're not jumping. That's why your left hand can do an octave. You can make it sound like a stand-up bass.
Right.
Bum 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 boom. That's what they were trying to do. So it's kind of a combination of all those things that make it work.
Yeah. Well, it's I've always loved the organ trio thing because it's always been, you're covering the bass duties as well as the chord comps on top, and then there's a guitar and drums. I love that combination. Is there a particular combo group or group that really inspired you when you were doing that, or was this just a means to an end?
No, I mean, we all had, and I'm sure you had, and all guitar players loved those records with Kenny Burrell and Jimmy Smith.
Oh, God.
And Grant Green and Brother Jack McDuff, and I mean, the list goes on and on. Eddie Wright and Freddie Roach, and I mean, there were amazing organ, drum, guitar combinations, and the sound, when you think of it, the Hammond organ and the electric guitar were basically invented at the same time. They came up together. They were kind of twins.
Yeah.
And so, like in the 30s, right, the very rudimentary idea of putting an electric pickup on a guitar was the same. Lawrence Hammond was taking that same technology of magnetic pickups and inventing the Hammond organ. And when you put those two sounds together, it's like peanut butter and jelly. They just go together.
Yeah.
There's something about the electric guitar and the electric organ. It's a match made in heaven. And so, I had those records before I played organ. We all loved the same records because, Grant's First Stand with Babyface Willette or whatever it was. If you were a guitar player, you had those records. And so I had those records, and, my friends had those records. And so when I started playing organ, of course, I had made a decision also. There's a lot of styles of organ. People just say, oh, he plays organ. Well, it's like saying, hey, you play electric guitar. Well, that could mean a lot of things stylistically. So I made a choice right away that I was going to learn, the style of organ I was going to do was going to be like Brother Jack McDuff and Babyface Willette and Big John Patton and Groove Holmes, that style, the organ trio style where you play the bass notes and all that.
Right.
I wasn't going to do Booker T and the MGs. I actually don't know any Booker T songs. I don't know any Meters songs. I mean, that would blow people away to think, but I never went down that road because I don't do gospel.
Right.
I can, obviously there's some gospel things that I know, but I would never say I'm a gospel player. I mean, when I made an album with Cornell Dupree, the great guitar player, he said, we were cutting one of the tracks, he said, well, give me, just the gospel intro. And I said, well, hey man, I'll give you what I got, but I said, I was raised in the Lutheran church, and he just laughed.
Well, that's true. I think you're right. I think a lot of people, when they see an organ, they have a preconceived notion of what it's supposed to be, what it's going to sound like, what it's there to do, and
right. And maybe to a lot of people, it's a certain generic idea of it, but for me, it's very particular. And I see my oldest sister. My oldest sister. I'm the youngest of 5, but my oldest sister played organ in our church. She was the church organist when I was a kid. I was 5 or 6, and she played the Hammond B3. It was a white one, and I remember it. I mean, I never played it, and it would be years and years later until I got involved with it. But I always remember that. Yeah. And then when I worked at pawn shop up in Denton, Glenn's Pawn Shop, a guy named Lou Bovis was a great organ player. He used to bring his B3 and 2 122s into pawn, and I used to help him carry it in. And I was always fascinated with it, just looking at it.
Yeah. It's funny. I played in a surf group for a while, and the organ player in that group was playing a farfisa.
Yeah.
And it's not the same instrument.
Right. It's not. And people, I only play Hammond organ. I don't play piano. I mean, even after all these years, I don't play synthesizers. I don't play Hammond organ clones even.
Right.
You know, and that was a choice that I made many years ago that at the time was really cost me a lot of work and cost me a lot of freedom to play. But I just hauled around a B3, and I'd only play a real B3, and it became it was a problem many times. And
just getting it up the stairs at the gallery probably was a
yes. And matter of fact, we just brought my B3 had been up there for 10 years, and I haven't really played the gallery in the last couple of years. And we just took my B3 down and replaced it with another Hammond organ up there. But that was, going down those steep stairs at the gallery. Yeah, it's never easy. I mean, there was nothing easy about playing the Hammond organ. It was not easy to play. It was difficult to move, but I just loved it. And, people thought I was crazy at the time because I was a guitar player. And, you throw your guitar in your case and get your amp. And, I was trading all that in for this, 450 pounds to take around.
Oh, man. I'm a firm believer that geography has a big influence or ingredient to what the musician ends up becoming. So you were born in South Dakota. You went
North Dakota.
Oh, it was North Dakota. Okay.
North Dakota.
And then you were in California, right, for a while, and then Louisiana in Shreveport, right?
Right. And so I was born in Minot, and we moved when I was, I think, 8 months old to California, in Northern California. My dad was he was an Air Force pilot. So we were at an Air Force base there, Castle Air Force Base, till I was about 8, and then we moved to Shreveport, Louisiana.
Right.
And we were there 3 or 4 years. Then we went to Michigan for a brief time, and then we moved to Texas. Now, I think I was 12 at that time. And so my dad and my mom, it's like North Texas and Oklahoma. My family comes from that area. So both my parents, I think they met in Tulsa, but and my grandfather lived up there. But they were all scattered throughout Texas and Oklahoma. That was their roots,
Mm-hmm. And then you landed in Denton.
Right. I had my older sisters were going to school up there at North Texas. Right. And so when my dad retired from the Air Force, we moved to Denton because my sisters just happened to be going to school there. And of course my parents were from this area. So yeah, that's where we landed. And thank God. I mean, you're right. Geography is everything. Mm-hmm. People try and wipe away this notion like world music and everything's together and music's just music and all music's the same. I mean, I guess there's an argument to be made for that. No lines. I like the lines, I like the geography. Yeah. I like the regionalism of it.
Yeah, it's like food. It's like food.
It is, and we like that. I mean, I do. Yeah. I like to. There's an identification because it's a reality. The reality is wherever you are, and especially at that time. Maybe not so much now with the internet and computers, and you can see everything. And but I learned from the guys I saw. Mm-hmm. And I played the music that was being played where I was, and if I was somewhere else, I would have been a different musician, or probably not a musician at all, to be honest. I mean, because I was lucky that, the Moeller brothers were in Denton, and we met up, and at that time, in the 80s, blues was such a boon. You know, you had the Fabulous Thunderbirds and you had Stevie Ray Vaughan kind of leading the way, but you also in Dallas had Anson Thunderberg and the Rockets with Sam Myers singing and Zuzu Bolin and a lot of great bands and guitar players and vocalists. And, you know, when we started playing up in Dallas, at that time, there were 1 million gigs. I mean, we played all the time.
What do you think it is about Denton? Because, I mean, still now to this day, there are musicians coming out of that town that are like Mingo Fish Trap, you know?
Right. It's kind of like Austin in a way. It's like a very small Austin. I mean, it's a college town, obviously, and I think there's that, you know, hippie element that was going on in Austin was also going on in Denton, you know, on Fry Street and all that back in at those times. Yeah. So, for me, it's funny because I've actually never played a gig in Denton to this day. Because I went to Dallas and that's where all the gigs were. Right. You know, were in Dallas. Right. And there wasn't. I mean, although I saw Reverend Horton Heat there, I saw a lot of bands. You know, but I wasn't actually set out to be a musician. I mean, I fell into that completely accidentally. I mean, I loved music. And I worked in a music store that was a pawn shop music store, Glenn's pawn shop. But of course, all the other people that worked there, they were in bands, they were great guitar players, and I just didn't consider myself, I had never been in a band. I was least likely to succeed at the pawn shop, you know. It wasn't anything that I did, but I tripped into it. I became interested in it, the blues, and by seeing guys like Anson Thunderberg, who is a master, and he had a great band, and Sam Myers. I mean, those people were the real deal. Zuzu Bolin and so forth. And the only reason I got into it because Johnny Moeller had to go to California. He was in a blues band in Dallas, and he said, "Do you want to take my place in this band?" And you know, because we had played at jams and stuff, but I'd never played a gig, you know, and that's a big difference. We went to all the blues jams. It's different to get up and play a few songs than to go play 3 sets at the Holiday Inn in Lancaster, you know. You know, your fingers just start bleeding immediately, so... You know.
Oh yeah, I know. So you were when you were playing guitar, you were just doing it for your own enjoyment, for your own satisfaction, right?
Yeah, I started my big interest when I was a kid was banjo. When I was in Denton, I was really into the banjo, and I made a banjo, you know, and I played banjo, and I was actually really good at banjo. I used to go to all the little bluegrass festivals. Right. And my parents never even knew I did this, you know. They knew I played banjo and so forth, but I would go to all the little festivals, and I loved it, and I still love bluegrass to this day. I mean, Fox on the Run, and I mean, some of the best musicians you'll ever see are bluegrass musicians. Oh, yeah. I mean, and it's akin to the blues, you know, just like everything.
Well, I mean, the two most American musical forms, I think, wouldn't you say, that and jazz?
Right, and jazz. And I think what attracts me to all three of those genres is you can be an amazing musician, right? You could be Earl Scruggs, you know, you could be Buddy Guy. I mean, you could express yourself. It wasn't a commercial thing. You know, those people sang and then they burned on their instruments. It's amazing. Yeah. You know, and jazz people the same way. So I think that's, even though I kind of started in bluegrass in a way, you know, I was always attracted to the same elements in music, always.
Yeah. And bluegrass was also, and you know, when we're talking about regional music, it was really a slice of a specific part of the country.
Absolutely. And even like in Texas, they had a lot of, and still now, you know, there's big bluegrass, they had a lot of bluegrass. And it was something that I could take my banjo to and see and jam in the parking lot with people and see people on small stages and become a part of. It was a regional thing. These were local people, right, playing local music to a degree. I mean, it all absolutely comes out of, the heartland of Kentucky and all that sort of stuff, but Texas as well, a lot of great artists, bluegrass people came out of here. So I felt a connection to it, just like I did when I started playing the blues, because those people were there. I could go see them and I could play with them. And, I wasn't trying to play music from, India or anything.
Right.
That had never held any interest for me, and it still doesn't. Like, I think, for me, I'm a regionalist, I guess.
Well, yeah, and then I guess when you got to Austin, did everything sort of like really frame up for you as far as your path?
Well, Clifford and Antone invited me to come to Antone's, to move to, he always encouraged me, why don't you move down here? Because I was already going down to Antone's, we all were. And that's when it all came together. I mean, Dallas is a great place to learn to play. There's a million gigs, there's a lot of great musicians, but the audience, the difference between Dallas and Austin was not that there were great musicians. There were great musicians in both places, but there was an audience in Austin, and Antone's was packed. I mean, I didn't play another club for 3 years when I moved here. I just went down to Antone's every day. Clifford would say, okay, we'll get up at 2 when Jimmy Rogers gets done, and then you guys will play till 4, They couldn't even serve drinks. He would say, you're opening today. Or he'd say, you're playing with Earl King today. You're the guitar player with Earl King, or whatever it was.
Right.
And it did come together because that's when the B3 came in, and there's a lot to it, but simply said, I mean, that's how it all really started. Yeah. In a real way.
Yeah. It's interesting when you and this, you just made me think of this. All the different people that you've played with and backed up and played alongside. I mean, hell, just in the last 5 years, but throughout your 25-year career so far.
Right.
I think it, for me, when I heard The Drifter for the first time, your first solo release,
right.
It really, and at that point in time when the record came out, I did not know that you also played guitar and you played the bass and you played the banjo. It wasn't until I saw you do the show at the Paramount for the release of the record that I realized, oh wow, he is truly a multi-instrumentalist, and that's why this record turned out the way it did. Would you agree with that?
Right. Well, it was, I mean, in a way, because I had not picked up a guitar in 20 years, really.
Wow.
Until the Drifter and the Paramount show in particular. Because when I started playing the B3, I put the guitar away. It's
completely.
at the closet.
Completely. Wow.
Because the organ was so difficult, and I just wanted to be an organ player. There was many people that never knew I played guitar ever at all. I mean, obviously, because so many years had passed. And but the Drifter record, when I had to put a show together for it, I realized, and I had to play some radio things, I realized I had to pick up the guitar again to be able to perform it. Right. So, I went out and bought that J200, that Gibson. Yeah,
that blonde.
I had to go buy it. I mean, I didn't have one, and so it was fun to get back into that. But I always wanted to be identified as a B3 player. That's what everybody knew me as. But the Drifter record pulled me. It was like the mob. It pulled me back in, to all the things that I actually can do, even if I wasn't doing them for many years.
Yeah. It's a great record. We listen to that here at the house all the time. It's a great record.
Oh, thanks.
Really great.
It was, that's a whole story with that Drifter record, if we can go on and on about that. But, I'm really proud of that record. It was a real unusual record, and I never thought it would ever be completed. And I didn't even, when I listened to it, when I had completed it, I didn't think it was a record. I listened to it and I thought, this is horrible. This doesn't make sense to me, this album.
What didn't make sense?
I would listen to this album, it's all over the map.
Okay.
It doesn't make any sense.
So that's what I was. That's what you felt didn't make sense? You didn't think it made sense because of the sequencing, or?
Well, I knew it made sense to me. The whole album made sense to me.
Right.
But I just didn't think it would make sense to anyone else.
Oh.
So a friend of mine heard it, because no one had heard it. I recorded all those songs with different people, different times. The left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing,
Yeah.
Nobody knew what the album was, even though so many people had been on it. But a friend of mine heard it, and they said, yeah, that is an album. You've got an album. You're not wrong,
Mm-hmm.
The people will like it. Whether anyone would like it, I guess, was my question. I liked the songs, and I liked the album. But
yeah.
Whether anyone else, and I was really surprised at what happened with it, because it really took off, and it it made a name for myself in a way.
Oh, absolutely. And it really transferred. A lot of times, a record may not transfer well live. It transferred really well live. I imagine.
Yeah,
I imagine you recorded a lot of it live in the studio.
Yes, we did. I mean, that's part of the thing I really try and do in the studio is to do it live.
Yeah.
And of course the Paramount show let me expand on the Drifter. It was great, because not only did we get to do the album, but we got to connect the dots in a way live and fill it out, which was exciting to do, and it was it's probably the biggest thing I ever did. It probably will always be that.
Well, I'll tell you, those performances of that night were just astounding. Did someone video that show?
We were going to, but the Paramount, it's a union hall, and to be able to do it was going to cost an extraordinary amount of money.
Wow.
So we didn't.
Wow.
But in a way, and we didn't record it either. We don't have, there's no, but in a way, and I knew it going in, and I thought, boy, I'm really going to wish I had taped this in some form, especially in this day and age when everything's documented,
Yeah.
But it's kind of nice that it isn't for me, because I just have the memory of it, and I think people that were there, it's one of those things that if you weren't there, you never saw it. And if you were there, you got the story, and you could tell somebody, well, how was that show? Or, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
for sure.
So
I'm one of those people that get to tell the story.
Yeah, well, and it's exciting, because I talk to people on occasion, and who tell me the story about them coming to the show, and it was an exciting time,
Oh, it was a great evening. It really was. I've seen you work with, I don't know, probably nearly a dozen different guitar players over the last, 6-7 years. First time I saw you play was at the Gallery in 2010 or 11.
Yeah.
And I was, with Frosty, and I think, and it was Jimmy. It was not Denny. It was Jimmy.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But I've seen you play with people like Eric Crisano, and of course Jimmy, Sue, Foley, Billy, Alejandro, Charlie Sexton, Denny, Derek. When you're playing with those different players, does your approach change when you're in a situation with those different people?
Absolutely, because they're all different,
Yeah.
So I'm listening to what they're doing, and my style is different. Not completely different, obviously. You can't change yourself, but depending on what And that's what I liked about it, because I was always playing the trio. It was always a trio, basically. But so that didn't change. And Frosty was willing to, he was so great at adapting to everybody's style as well. So me and Frosty basically would adapt to whoever we had. If it was Johnny Moeller, it might be more funk, or if it was Denny, it would be kind of somebody along the lines of Cornell Dupree, where they're playing some jazz things and they're playing some soul things, and we're playing some blues things. Or if it's Jimmie, obviously, straight blues. And or like I had Jake Langley, and that was purely a jazz gig. Right. So I liked doing all those different things, but probably the last couple of years I've been doing it kind of when I started playing with Jimmie, and that was probably around 2010. Yeah, probably right. Yeah. Yeah. So, Jimmie changes you as a musician, because he's so heavy that he does it to everybody. It's not just me. That when you play with him, and of course I've played with him so many times and over the years and been with him for so long now, he's definitely had a big influence on how I play.
Well, it's interesting because he comps a little bit like an organ player sometimes.
Right. Well, he's so attuned, and he's really, he knows that guitar, and so he knows the voicings, and he plays whatever he's playing, he's meaning to play it. There's no accidents. Yeah. Or there's no filler. Yeah. Really. He's so different
from 20, 25 years ago, 30 years ago. His playing is so different now. I was talking to Tyrone about it, and I was saying he sounds more like Earl King now than he did 30 years ago. Don't you think?
Well, he's had, I would say, 3 or 4 different stylistic periods for sure. I mean, obviously, the T-Birds, the early T-Birds, the later T-Birds were probably 2 different periods in a way. For sure. And then when he went solo, and when he started doing the stuff with the capo and playing more like a sax player, and he came up with that whole genius band and concept, and his guitar playing changed
big time.
Right, it changed then.
And then when I see him play with you, there's those jazz blues leanings when I see him play with you.
Right, and that was stuff that he came up with after we started playing together. It was interesting because we were playing jazzier things that he had not really played before, and I was curious as how's he going to learn how to do this. I was curious about it. I knew he would, but it was a good window in to see how Jimmie thinks, right? And these are a bunch of jazz, like all these 2/5s and that concept of 2/5, 3/6, 2/5, that stuff. Yeah. And how jazz players feel that. But what Jimmie did was he listened to the sax player Gene Ammons, and I saw him do this. And it was a genius. It really gives you an insight into the way he looks at things. So he has a very vocal delivery on guitar, right? Yeah. And so when he would, he didn't study other guitar players. He didn't sit down and, I'm going to learn Kenny Burrell or Grant Green and see how they're doing this. He studied Gene Ammons, And so when he plays over those sort of changes, that's what you're hearing. And he would practice the slurs. He would get them on the guitar, the tenor sax slurs and honks.
So he's almost bringing a breath element to a guitar that has no air. An instrument that has no air.
Absolutely. And you can hear him do the honk, and you can hear him do the slurs between notes, like a sax player would.
Yeah.
And of course that brought a different style to his playing. That carried over even when he did a blues thing. I remember at Madison Square Garden at the first Eric Clapton Crossroads Festival that I was at, and we had been playing, organ stuff for 2-3 years, and so he had some of that stuff under his fingers, that he does now and was doing back then, but it was kind of new to people that were familiar with Jimmy, and he was playing with Eric Clapton and B.B. King and Robert Cray. They were doing a song, and it came Jimmy's time to play. It was a shuffle, and Jimmy threw one of those things in, those Gene Ammons, Jimmie Vaughan things in the middle of a blues, and it just fucked everybody up. Those guys started laughing. They were like, "What did you just do?" And it was perfect. It wasn't thought out. The other thing about Jimmy, when he does figure out something, he plays it all the time. It becomes part of his language.
Yeah.
And so he has the ability to just throw it in at will. It's never a lick. It becomes part of him, right? So it was another interesting thing. So he taught me a lot about being a musician and a stylist, and what are you going to say on your instrument? What are you saying? People talk about it all the time, but when you have to play a solo, and I do it all the time, when Jimmie Vaughan plays, and then you have to play a solo, right?
Yeah.
And you have to do it every night, year after year. I mean, I remember at the beginning, I just felt horrible, because I thought, well, I'm not saying anything. It was like having to give a speech after Abraham Lincoln or something. It felt very inept.
So it forced you to reevaluate what you're doing.
Yeah, because you had to drop all the bullshit, whatever that, as much as possible. You had to try and say something.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that makes total sense. That makes total sense.
Yeah. What are you feeling? What do you want to communicate to the people that are listening?
Yeah.
What's your style?
Yeah.
Does it fit into your style? What is your style? All those things. You could drive yourself crazy thinking about it. But yeah, it made me address that issue. What makes you different? Why do you sound different from every other organ player?
Right.
There's a lot of great organ players.
So did that just happen over time, or was it something you had to go and woodshed?
It happened over time, but it was also something I consciously thought about to a degree, because Jimmy always uses that story. If I'm in a room, in a little roundabout, guitar jam session with B.B. King and Buddy Guy and Otis Rush and Albert Collins and Lightnin' Hopkins, and we all take a solo after each other, what am I going to play when it gets to me? Because I can't play what those guys play. I can't just copy those guys, because that would be laughable if I just played like B.B. King right after B.B. King. So that's what Jimmy always told himself when he was coming up. What they have a style, right? They're identifiable.
Yeah, that's true.
What is your style that is identifiable? So Jimmy consciously thought about it, and he said, he goes, you may find your style, and he goes, you may not even like your style to begin with. which is true.
Well, I can definitely relate to that.
Right? You're like, well, if this is my style, this sucks, right?
Exactly.
Right? But he said that, and he thought of it for himself. I mean, I've thought of that for myself, because we want to be. We're all music fans first, right? Above being players, we love. If you're a guitar player, we love BB. You love BB King. You love Eric Clapton, you love Jimi Hendrix, or whoever it is. and you want to emulate those people. I mean, that because you love it so much.
Right.
That comes first. The second question later becomes, well, what's your style?
Right.
So
where do you take it from there? Right.
It's a big question.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Yeah.
And
well, it's interesting too. It's like, for those who are listening and those who don't know, here in Austin, there's this. It looks like it's semi-traditional now. This thing that you guys have been doing with you and Chris Layton, Sue Foley, Jimmie Vaughan, and Billy Gibbons, called the Jungle Show.
Right.
And it's been happening now. Well, I guess 2 years, right? I guess it's 2 years now. I've been to every one of them.
Yeah. Probably a couple of years.
I've been to every one of them, and it's like going to school.
Wow.
It's like going to school, And so when you're up there, and how do you manage a Sue Foley, a Billy Gibbons, and a Jimmie Vaughan? How do they work that out?
Well, it was all like most good things in life. It was all completely accidental,
Yeah.
And I had to do a gig with Gibbons at the Moody Theater. It was a tribute. How they have the Hall of Fame every year for ACL now, and so they were doing B.B. King, and they had B.B. King's band there, and Gary Clark was there, and Bonnie Raitt was there. Of course, when it came down to songs, people were doing The Thrill Is Gone, Every Day I Have the Blues, kind of the usual suspects. And so when I talked to Gibbons, he was like, well, man, they're all doing that. What are we going to do? And I said, man, let's do The Jungle. I love that song, B.B. King song, The Jungle. And let's just, and me and Gibbons had talked about it. We were going to just do a 3-piece, even though we had the B.B. King's whole band there, the horns and everything. We were like, we're just going to do an organ trio with B.B. King's drummer, which we did. We did it real low down. It was really, in my mind, it really stood out in the show because it was so simple and bare. But I think that was on a Wednesday. That gig was a Tuesday or Wednesday. And he was going to be in town. I knew he had a couple days off. I said, well, what if I get a gig together at Antone's? And if you notice the first Jungle Show T-shirt and the ads and stuff, it just says Gibbons Flanigin.
Right.
The Jungle Show.
Yeah. Because
that was the band. There was no one else.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at the poster right now.
Yeah, there was nobody else, and so I knew we were going to get a band. I didn't know who it was going to be, and I didn't know what we were going to do.
Right.
But I talked to George Raines, and he couldn't do it. And then that afternoon, I ran into Chris Layton over at Ruby's Barbecue, and I said, "Oh, are you in town? Do you want to do it?" This was like 10 days away from the show or something. He was like, "Oh yeah," and then Sue originally was going to open the show. And Derek was going to be the third guitar player, but Derek couldn't do it. So we go, okay, well, Sue, you just play the show with us. We won't have an opener. And then I called Jimmie just to see if he wanted to do it. And he was like, yeah. And so it was real low key. It wasn't, now the Jungle Show's turned into a thing, but its beginnings were completely accidental and haphazard. And of course, in the back of my mind too, since I had worked with Gibbons a lot and I worked with Jimmie a lot, I always thought it'd be great to get both of them together because, for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
And so it just, the chemistry was right amongst everybody. And of course, I was a huge fan of Sue she was at Antone's when we were all coming up. We were all in the little Antone's house band, and of course she was the best one. She was the most amazing guitar player at 20, and she had come back around. She had just kind of popped up. I went and found her. Really, I wondered what happened to Sue, and she was in North Carolina, and so she had not been playing blues and her solo stuff in about 8 years. She was just trying to get back kind of on her feet with everything. And I was like, oh, well, that's the other piece of the puzzle, because she's great. And of course, she's anyway, the chemistry and the combination of those people all are really something special in my mind.
Yeah.
With Chris and drums, there's just so much history and there's so much music, and it's real Texas blues.
Oh, it really is, and it's amazing because I love to watch. I mean, it's putting those three different stylistic guitar players together, along with you, and then that and Leighton's backbeat. It really works. It's amazing, and it's a great night of like great old blues, great Jimmy Reed tunes and stuff like that. And it's just stripped down. It's really simple, but it's incredibly entertaining, and it really is. I mean, there have been many times I've left that show and go, well, I ain't gonna play no more. I'm done.
I'd probably say the same thing when I leave that show. Well, you're right. They are, and it gave us all chances, and especially Billy, because he doesn't get the chance to do Jimmy Reed and Slim Harpo or Elmore James or and to play with blues musicians of that caliber backing him up doing those things. I mean, when you're doing Elmore James and Jimmie Vaughan's your rhythm guitar player and Sue Foley, right? Like,
what sucks
Billy,
there?
And Billy just loves it. I mean, he really has a great time, and it gives everybody a chance to do things that maybe they don't get to do all the time. So.
Yeah. I wanted to touch on the, back on the Drifter. There's a track on there. It's my favorite track. It's called All Night Long.
Oh yeah.
And for me, that song is when I heard that song, I was like, oh, that's what I saw at the gallery. And that's what I saw at Sea Boys.
Yeah.
And
well, I'm glad you say that, because that's what my point was on that song. See, that album was really just about my life at that time. All those songs I wrote about my real life, at that moment. Because I actually thought I was going to be out of music. I thought I was going to put that album out, and then I was going to be out of music. Yeah, at that time.
Wow.
The Drifter album, a lot of things came together that saved me from just going and getting a job, back at the pawn shop.
Wow.
I was even thinking about doing that,
Wow.
Because I was struggling. I just wasn't making enough money. But then, and I've got 2 kids. I mean, it's so expensive to live in Austin. And I'd figured I had 3 more months worth of money before I was going to be completely out, and had to find something else to do. So that album saved me, because right after that came out, I started doing a bunch of gigs with Jimmy. Kind of around that time, I did the Montreux with ZZ Top. Right. I did Billy Gibbons' solo record. And then we went on tour with that. Yeah. And so everything happened at once, I mean, everything great happened, and it changed my life, that period of time. Because before that, I'd spent many years playing the gallery and making, $100. I mean, you can't live off of that. I mean,
especially in this town.
Yeah, and I loved the music, but it seemed like it was just the road was coming to an end. And so when I put the Drifter record out, that changed everything, and which I didn't expect it to, but it did, thank God. But like All Night Long, I wrote that. I wanted to write a song. I wanted to do something that would represent all those nights at the gallery playing all night long, right?
Oh, cool.
And so I really didn't have the song together at all. Jimmy was coming to the studio, and he got lost. And it gave me an extra 30 minutes to think of what we were going to do. And so in that 30 minutes, I came up with All Night Long, and here's how it goes, and we'll sing this little thing. But to me, that represents what we do, at Sea Boys or the gallery, because we sing a little bit in the song, and we play a little bit in the song, and that's what we do. And we do it all night. People say, when do you play tonight? And I say, well, we start at 10:30, we play all night long.
And it was great because it's sort of like that to me. When I first heard that song, I was like, oh, cool, this is so great. It reminds me of those nights that I go to see him play. And then you guys came out with Live at Seaboys,
right?
Which is just an amazing disc. I know it's getting a lot of airplay on Sirius. Certainly gets a lot of airplay around here. My wife plays that record all the time, and how that was just what? How many shows was that, or was that just one show?
Oh, that was just one set.
That was just one set of one show, and you just let it roll, and whatever came out came out.
We probably recorded 9 nights.
Okay.
Over the course of 2 years, maybe, or a year and a half, or whatever it was. Every once in a while, they'd record it. They'd bring up all the equipment and record it.
I wonder if I'm on there.
What's that?
I wonder if I'm at that show.
You might be.
I might be.
But what happened was, so they went to go back to listen to what we had, and Jimmie, they put on the I don't know if it was the first set or the second set of the last night that we had recorded, and Jimmie just listened to the first set and was like, that's good. I don't think he wanted to wade through 9 nights of stuff,
Well,
even though we'd recorded it. I mean, I think he listened to it and he said, well, that sounds good, and that's right. What we do. And he didn't want to put out a long, we put it out on vinyl. He wanted it to be, like the records used to be. He didn't want to put out 75 minutes worth of music, although we had it. Mm-hmm. I mean, we could put out a 9 CD box set of that stuff. But Jimmie purposely kept it short and sweet,
right,
and representative of what we do.
Right.
And he did a great job. He's really a fantastic, he's got such a unique and fantastic way of mixing things.
That's interesting.
He has some tricks. I can't divulge them, but he does some things. It always sounds, his mixes to me, I always, I really, think he's such a master in the studios.
Right. It's so funny, every time I see him, I say hello, we chat a little bit, and I'm always on the tip of my tongue to ask him to come and do the show, and then I always chicken out.
Oh, right. Well, you ought to ask him.
I will. Eventually I'll do it. Eventually I'll ask him.
Well, he's great. He has all the best answers. Whenever I do an interview with Jimmie, he says the best stuff. He has the best quotes. It's all off the cuff.
Yeah.
He's a great interviewer.
He's a natural.
Yeah, he really is.
I wanted to talk to you about this Sue Foley record, man.
Yeah.
I sent you a Facebook message after hearing the record, saying that, I know people love you for your Hammond B3 playing and everything else, but after this record, people are going to be looking to you as a producer, because this really just came out so good.
Oh, thanks.
This is what I told Sue this. This record, remember there was a time period when blues records came out in the 70s. Some of the blues records that came out, they were just really plastic sounding. They just didn't have. They didn't have that. Not like the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. Those blues records were. Those Etta James records, those Chess records, and all that stuff. They just had that.
Absolutely.
That's what this record has.
Well, I'm glad you say that, and from what you just described, your thinking is just like mine, which is, for me, what I listen to, and I think what everybody listens to who likes those kinds of music, you listen to those same eras, 50s and 60s, and not so much the 70s. Yeah. I mean, the T-Birds were a different thing, but they recorded like they were in the 50s.
Exactly.
So, I like those records, right? You like those records. Mm-hmm. So, if you make a record, And it's not just about like, I'm not trying to capture the sound of because they have people now that do that so good. They capture the exact sound of the 60s 45 or the 50s chest sound.
Right.
You know, it's a whole art. That's not my intention, really. My intention is to capture what those people captured, which is a great live performance,
right.
whatever that is.
Right.
In the studio, you can hear the people playing together. You know they're playing together. You can hear the room. And so when I think about recording, that's the only way I think of recording. Because there's some magic about a live vocal. You know, those vocals were live. You know, Sue was, you know, people are used to, and for good reason, okay, we'll do the track and then I'll sing the vocal.
Mm-hmm.
But I was insistent that we use the live vocal, and since we were all in the room, it caused a lot of problems for the engineer, and the engineer didn't want to do that, and Sue wasn't so sure about it, because I knew Sue could do it. I mean, here's the thing about a record like that. You have to have people that can deliver.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
If your whole concept is I'm trying to capture a moment and an amazing performance, well, you have to have an amazing performance and a moment to capture, and Sue was great about that. She sang her ass off. She played her ass off live. Yeah. And I knew she could do it, and everybody in the different musicians all did the same. So when you hear her vocal, you know, it sounds different if you overdub a vocal.
Yeah.
It sounds more separated.
Yeah.
The singer usually is not as emotionally attached because they're not in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Or same thing with a guitar overdub. Mm-hmm. Same exact thing.
No, I agree.
And not that great things, I mean, I love produced records. I mean, many albums. I mean, if you put on a Boston album, it's genius, you know, all overdubbed, right, or whatever. So I'm not saying one's wrong and one's right, but I think for the style of music that we do and that Sue does, that's what we like about it.
Yeah.
That's the records we like, and there's a reason for that, and so that was my approach.
Yeah.
But that was just one facet of it. I mean, and we had to find a studio that was big enough, you know, where we could all be in the room. I mean, when we did If I've Forsaken You, I mean, we had, you know, 5 horn players, 2 trumpets, trombone, baritone, and tenor, and organ, and stand-up bass, and drums, and Jimmie, and Sue in the middle of the room singing live. I mean, everything's bleeding into each other, and the engineer's pulling his hair out, and
just like the old days.
He doesn't want to do it like that. Sue maybe doesn't want to sing it live. You know, I mean,
well, it's
well, I had a big argument with the horn players on that track. You know, because they had flubbed a note with one of the trumpet players on a take, and they said, well, we can just record the intro again and then you can splice it on. And I just told them no, that this is live, and that whatever happens, and if I mess up on the organ and that's the best take, you know, then that's what we're going to do, you know.
Yeah.
And it was really a hard pill for people to swallow.
Yeah.
In a way, sometimes, because you don't want a record where oh, well, what did that trumpet player do, or what did is that a flub?
Yeah.
But we love all those records, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, we hear flubs all the time. Like, that's my favorite record. It's got 3 flubs on it. It doesn't bother us, but it's now that you can change things all the time, but that's a Pandora's box. I mean, you start opening that stuff up, and it's like you could, you know, drive yourself crazy trying to make things perfect.
Yeah.
I like the imperfect stuff, and I like the real stuff, and that's what I tried to do with that record.
It's so funny, you actually brought up my favorite song on the record.
If I've Forsaken.
Oh man.
Yeah.
When I got the disc from y'all, I went ahead and jumped in the car, and it was dark, and I was just driving, listening to the record, and I was like, "This is amazing." And I was just letting it wash over me, And when it got to that track, I had to pull over. I felt like I had gotten transported to somewhere. And I mean, if I told Sue, if Etta James was still alive, she'd say, "I need to sing this song."
Well, I'm glad that you thought that. We all thought that at the time, in a way, when we heard it back, that it was so magical.
Oh, so
and of
magical.
course, the horn arrangements, John Mills had come up with some stuff, but then when he came in, I had to rearrange it all on the spot, and no one knew the song, and the bass player, what are the changes, and Jimmy didn't know, what am I doing? No one knew the song but me and Sue.
Right.
But the arrangement part, only I knew, because there was a certain chord passage thing that happened, and I was trying to arrange the horns, and it was really chaotic, just for me, trying to get it all together. And but it was exciting, and it was real, because I think, well, this is what they were doing at the Bobby Bland session, at Duke in the 50s, 60s. It was just like this, and so I think it sounds like that, and it was like that, and it was, all live. And when Sue brought me that song, the album, the Ice Queen album, started. She sent me her demos. And it was just her and an acoustic guitar, and she had sent me, that was one of the songs on there, obviously, and I wanted to do something different with that song and not just do it like a guitar blues, which you could do,
Yeah.
And because it was such a great song and it had such emotion, and I wanted people to hear the words, and I wanted, and we both loved those Bobby Bland things, Two Steps from the Blues. And so it's just an homage to that, and Sue had written a song that fit in with that kind of thing.
Yeah, it is for me. That's the standout track on the record. There's a couple other ones I wanted to actually ask you about.
Sure.
But before I jump off of that track, on If I Have Forsaken You, how many takes did you do of that?
2.
Yeah, I had a feeling it was just 2. So that's amazing. So even though as chaotic as it was, everybody was able to get through it.
Right. And I can't remember if we used the first take or the second take. I can't remember.
I'd have to go back and listen. I have to go back and listen to what Sue and I talked about, because I think she told me. I can't remember.
Right. Yeah. So, my recollection, we just did 2, and most of the album was like that. We didn't just do take after take after take. In my mind, if you play live, it feels weird if let's say you were playing live and you did a song, and then someone said, "Hey, do that song again," right?
Yeah.
It's weird. It's not going to be right. And then you get done with it, and they go, "Hey, man, do that song one more time." Like, you would think, this is stupid, this is crazy, but people go into the studio and they do that all the time.
Yeah.
Take number, 147.
Yeah.
I was listening to it was Bob Seger was talking about one of his albums, and then there was one song where he said they actually did like 140 or 50 takes, and he said that they ended up using take number 7. But I think that the energy goes out of the room after 3 at the most, and usually it's the first take. I mean, unless there's just maybe people don't know the song and it's the song form, you know what I'm saying? But usually you get it in 1 or 2.
Yeah.
I remember on the Drifter record, the Alejandro song, that was just 1 take. We never recorded another take.
Wow.
you know, and it was kind of ridiculous because you probably should have recorded another take just in case something technical happens
Right.
to the, you know, just to be safe or something. But I didn't even do that. We all got the studio, did it once, and it was great. And I was like, "What? I think we're done," you know.
What about?
It's taken me a year to get Clem Burke, you know, played drums from Blondie.
Right.
It was, you know, tough to get everybody assembled for that song.
Yeah.
And we did it, and we were done in one take, and everybody just looked at me like I was crazy, and I was like, I think that's it. I guess we could do it again, but I don't know why we would.
It must have been even tougher to get everybody there at the Paramount.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Of course, it was. I couldn't get Jimmie. You know, Jimmie was gone. That was the only. I mean, it was just an Alejandro. I think it was his anniversary or something,
right.
and he couldn't make it. So, but I still think, yeah, we had a great show. It would have been great to have Jimmie and Alejandro, obviously.
Sure.
You know, but it just couldn't be done at the time.
Yeah. On the Ice Queen record, there's the track that opens the record called "Come to Me" with Charlie Sexton on there.
Right.
So there's another guy who is also very unique sound, very specific sound. When I hear him, I know it's him. You know.
Right. Yeah.
He's one of those guys. Like when I saw him with Dylan, you know, it was, you know, or at the Austin Music Awards at the AMAs. He was the musical director this year, and it's just you can tell that's, you know, this is Charlie. This is his thing.
Oh yeah.
You know,
I mean, Charlie's just, you know, he's a genius.
Yeah.
Really, and he's the hardest working man in show business, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
I mean, that guy, he'll come off the road with Dylan in Europe for 2 months, and the day he gets home, he'll go straight to the studio and be producing a record for a week, and then he'll put together the Austin Music Awards, and then he'll go put the Hurricane benefit together, and then he'll go back in the studio. I mean, I don't think he has a day off ever.
Yeah.
And I think that's true. Like, I don't know how he does it, but he's so musical. Music is just him. He is music 24 hours a day.
Yeah, it's like food for him, I think, or air.
Yeah. he can pick up any instrument and play the hell out of it. Yeah. And he picks up a guitar, and he just, I mean, we were over at his house not long ago, and we put on, I forget, a Kenny Burrell record or something. He picked up a guitar and was just playing. He would tell you he's not a jazz player. He was sitting there just blowing through all these changes and all this stuff just by ear, and it sounded like a Joe Pass or somebody.
Unreal.
You know, because it's just all music to him, and he's just unbelievable. But yeah, it's always great to have Charlie. Of course, I've known Charlie, but it really wasn't until I did the Paramount show and that I really got to know Charlie, you know, and we've been great friends ever since. I mean, I love playing with Charlie, and I just love Charlie, and he is an amazing guitar player that you know it's him as soon as he picks up a guitar.
Yeah, for sure. What was that session like?
Oh, with the
Come to Me.
On Come to Me?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that was interesting because there was a couple songs that I was actually going to use the Cox family that is from Louisiana. They play with Alison Krauss. They're like a bluegrass harmonizing family. And that's originally how we were going to do 81. And Sue had a song called Nothing Is Better that we never actually recorded. And I was going to have the Cox family come in. And then they all got sick. Like 2 days before. And Charlie was around and Chris Layton was around. I was like, well, can you guys come in the studio? And, you know, Sue has songs, and we ended up cutting 81 the way you hear it now. You know, like that was not going to be that way.
Huh.
You know, that's one of the big blues rock tracks.
Yeah.
And of course, I was cognizant at the time that Sue was coming back, and she's such a great blues artist. I was like, we have to veer this album towards blues, as much as we possibly can. And she ended up, of course, writing the Lucky Ones after the initial demos. And we wrote Fool's Gold and different things. But 81 was one of those tracks that could have gone either way, and I'm glad it went the way it did, because we got Charlie and we got Chris. And also when we did 81, we did Come to Me, and Sue had that song, and we just hey, here's the song. Of course, Chris and Charlie are so great. I think that was the first, not only the first take, I think that was the first attempt at that song. We were recording, and we're okay. Let's try the song. Everybody had gotten a feel for it. Okay, this is the song. Okay, let's try to go all the way through the song. And Sue was playing acoustic guitar, her nylon string, and Charlie was playing slide, and Chris was on drums, and Sue sang it and played acoustic guitar. I ran her acoustic guitar through an amp in the studio and put a lot of reverb on it, I think, on the amp. So I'm not that into studio trickery or anything. I like things to sound like they do, but on that particular song, that's what we did. And then that's really, I think, the only overdub we did, because we had to overdub Sue playing guitar, which actually wasn't going to happen for a long time. That happened because I liked the song the way it was.
Right.
But then we were like, well, we really need to have some guitar. And Sue was like, yeah, we really need guitar on this. And I'm glad we did, but we brought her in later. She didn't even have her Paisley Telecaster.
Huh.
She had come to town. She did not bring her guitar. And so she used, I have a SG. It's just a cheap Epiphone SG I bought used, for $200 or something.
Huh.
So she played that on the lead guitar, on that song.
Wow.
And but then that's on 81. So Come to Me. Oh wait, I'm sorry. I was talking about 81. Come to Me. No, she didn't play acoustic guitar. She played her electric guitar. It was just like it was. Charlie was playing slide, and Sue was playing her pink Paisley, and Chris was on drums. And so that was the first time they ran the song down. I think we did 2 takes on it. And the first one had the best groove. It had the best feel, And but I liked it because it starts off very loose.
Yeah, it's really vibey. It's such a vibey track.
And Chris hits the drums a few times, and then they figure out the beat, and then they kind of get going on it.
Yeah, it's a vibey track. I love. It's a great way to open the record.
Yeah, I'm glad you think so. Yeah, it was. I always liked that track. I mean, it was funny because each of the songs, they were all so different, but they were all recorded with the kind of a common thread of let's do it live and let's get a groove and all that. It's very dependent, that record was very, very dependent on everybody, being who they were and making some magical moments,
When you're in a situation like that and you're producing and you have to be the skipper, is there a lot of, do you find yourself having to negotiate sometimes, or are you saying, no, this is the way it's going to go and that's just how it's going to go?
Oh, both, kind of. I mean, you definitely have a philosophy. You're the one that's, the artist is too busy. They have to sing and play, and everybody does. And so you're the one that has to have the vision of what this is supposed to be and what you're trying to get. And so, it is a lot. I felt a lot of responsibility on Sue's record because it was her first album after 8 years, and I knew it was really going to affect her career.
Mm-hmm.
That album, if it was good or if it was not good,
Yeah.
So I felt a lot of responsibility that it had to be the best that I could do for her and for the music and everything. And I knew we had a great album from the demos. Just her songs, I was like, okay, well, she's great, the songs are great, and now it's my responsibility to make sure all that comes through. And I did feel the weight of that, because you are gambling with, if you're not tracking and doing a lot of overdubs where you have control over everything, if you're going for that live vibe, you're really gambling that we're going to get a magical take or we're going to get a good take. And so you're holding your breath. If you're hearing a good take, you are holding your breath that they finish it.
Yeah,
right? Because they don't know it's magic sometimes.
Right.
They're just playing. And sometimes someone will just stop. I mean, that happens where you're in the middle of a magical take and someone says, my kick drum is sliding out, and stops it. So you're just praying that doesn't happen,
That's crazy. Another thing that is really interesting about this record, and I'm always fascinated by, a great record can have a lot of great songs, but it also has to be sequenced just right, also, for it to be a really good record. And I said this to Sue, that I think this record got sequenced correctly to make it a great record. Was that hard?
I think you're exactly right. The sequence is everything.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It really is. And with an album like that, and the Drifter gave the same way. Could have been sequenced a lot of different ways, and it took me a year to sequence that record, Drifter. And it wasn't right before I turned it in for mastering. The day before, I switched one song, and then it made sense.
Wow.
Yeah, I pulled the Gary Clark song back.
Wow.
And then it all made sense. Before then, I was like, this almost makes sense. So with Sue's record, you're right, because there's a lot of ways it could have gone.
Oh, yeah.
And it could have sounded like a bit more of a confused record if it were sequenced wrong.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a lot of ways we sequenced that record. And I think in the end, I'm glad you said that. I think we did it correctly. Now, there was something always appealing to me about opening with the Ice Queen song, because she says, I came to you this evening far away from here. It's such a great opening. Right? But to open with a 7 or 8 minute slow blues,
No, the way that, I agree. It would have been too much of a lull in the beginning. Yeah,
it would have been, right? So it was like, but I always really was like, that would be such a great opening. But you have to, and of course we had Stony Plain Records got the album, and Holger Peterson is a great music man up there who runs that label. They had a hand. Sue had sequenced it that way on her SoundCloud that she was using to send to people, publicists or the label or whatever. Here's the record. The record was not out, obviously, or printed up yet, or sequenced yet. It wasn't mastered yet, I guess. But she had a sequence, and we changed that sequence all the time. And Sue, at some point, had that sequence up. And the record company's like, well, we like the sequence that's on the SoundCloud right now. And so that's how it came that way. And which was great for me, because once I realized that sequence, I was like, there you go. That's the way it should go, right?
Right.
And I didn't even have to beat my head against the wall, Stu just kind of put it that way accidentally one day or however, it just turned out that way. And then that's what ended up seemingly to work. Everything made sense when I listened to it. I was like, okay, yeah, this makes sense. And so yeah, it was a happy accident, like a lot of things are.
Yeah, it's a great record. It really is just fantastic. And I know she's touring it around now. She's got a different group now. Does she have someone playing B3 for her while she's out there?
No.
Okay, so
she's just out as a trio, which I really like. She's out there with just drums, bass, and her. And of course, she did that for many years. It was just a trio.
Yeah.
And I always liked when she did trio, but it's hard, right? Like there's nobody else to solo and all that.
Yeah.
But she's so great she can do it that way, and I really encouraged her, go back out as a trio. There's something about a trio that I love, the number 3. And there's no, it's 3 people.
Yeah. Whether
you're ZZ Top or Super League Trio, band. There's something about seeing 3 people that I really like because everybody's working hard.
Well, there's air, too. There's all that air.
There's air. Yeah.
I love that. That's why I love watching you and Jimmy and George play, and back when Frosty was around when he was playing. It's really that air, man. It's just you can look in between it all. You can stick your head in there. It's just like this is great.
Right.
I love it.
Well, and there's something about when it's 3 people. There's a sense of communication between 3 that you can't do with 4. That's why bank robberies are always 3 people, right?
Well put. So you're working on a new record now with Jimmy, or what's going on?
Well, we're doing some recording. I don't know if we're working on a record or not, because the way Jimmy operates is he just records when he feels like recording. And then when he has enough material he likes, that's a record.
Okay.
So we're kind of always recording. I mean, we did record, last week we were recording, and we're recording, Jimmy just likes to not really, you never know with him what's going on, and he likes it that way. And he's always been that way, and I don't blame him, which is, he knows what's going on, and you don't necessarily know, but it's all good, and we're recording, and so we had a great time in the studio last week, and it's always fun. I love being in the studio. I used to not, but now I really like it, and I think it's important to and Frosty was a big proponent of that. And I'm sorry I didn't do it more when he was alive. He was into, let's document what we're doing, and I wasn't that excited about the prospect of documenting it at the time. But Jimmy's always documenting it. It's smart, because in the end, that's what you have. You can play all the live shows you want, but it's the record that will last the test of time.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, this isn't going to air today, so I can say this. So nobody gets freaked out or anything like that or anything. But so tonight you're playing. You're playing at Seaboys with Jimmy and George, and I know the Rot Rally is also going on.
Right.
And I have a feeling you may have a guest show up.
Well, not tonight, because those guys have to go straight to Oklahoma. Back to Oklahoma.
Okay.
So they had a gig last night in Oklahoma. They're here. After the show tonight, they'll pack up, get on the bus, and go straight back to Oklahoma.
Oh, okay. I had a feeling. I was just speculating, because I know that has happened in the past.
Yeah, I think if they had time, absolutely, Billy would come down and play. Or he just loves to come down to see boys when we're playing. And I mean, unless there's something I don't know, but that's my thought, is I know they have a gig.
Right.
In northern Oklahoma tomorrow, and usually the MO is you get on the bus and you head back out.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I got to tell you, man, I'm excited for what's coming up and anything new from you and everything you do. I love coming to see you play, man. You know that. You see me with a big old smile on my face when I watch you play.
Well, I appreciate you coming out, man. And I mean, that's what I love about playing music, is the people and seeing everybody and people having a good time. And that's what it's all about, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Before I let you go, I do want to ask you about those shows. When you guys were up in New York, you did a show at Lincoln Center with Steve Miller.
Yeah.
That must have been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, we've done, I want to say 3 of those now.
Well, you've done the Iridium there, right?
And we did the Iridium too. And then Steve came and sat in with us at Iridium. But the Lincoln Center shows were, Steve Miller's involved with Lincoln Center and trying to put on some blues shows. So like one was I think the second one was a tribute to, more or less, to T-Bone Walker.
Right.
The first one was kind of bridging Miles Davis to, from Bessie Smith to Miles Davis. I think, kind of showing how blues and jazz, are separated at birth.
I think that's the one I saw on PBS.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe so. You say it was on PBS?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah. Well, that was the first one. And then this last one we did, Charlie Musselwhite joined us, and it was called, I think, From Memphis to Chicago, kind of showing that route. But, yeah, I was a huge fan of Steve Miller growing up.
Yeah.
And same was ZZ Top. I mean, I was not a guy that was that hip and had a big record collection. I was listening to classic. I was listening to radio station like everybody else up in Dallas, and it was Steve Miller, and ZZ Top. Those were the 2 bands they all played. You know what I'm saying? There was a lot of ZZ Top and Steve Miller, and so I was a big fan of both. And both those bands, ironically enough, were really what started me on the path to the blues. Was Steve Miller had the Joker record. Now, when I was in Michigan, I bought that, and me and my brother would buy ZZ Top records and stuff when we were in Michigan. And the Joker had, Mercury Blues on it, and and Fly Like an Eagle, and they would do, Come On Into My Kitchen and all that stuff. And it was really the first blues that I heard, and was along with ZZ Top. It's kind of, that was the first stuff. So the fact that I got to play with all those guys, and then of course I've been playing with Billy and Jimmie, but I had not met Steve Miller, so that was a big thing for me. And he was really, it was crazy because you meet these guys and you think, well, it'll be nice to meet him. And, Steve Miller's kissing you on the cheek and you're the greatest organ player in the world. I had this poster he signed him. He goes, you're the greatest organ player. He had so much great organ on his records, and Fly Like an Eagle. He was just super nice. And it was just really cool to do those shows and to get to know him and hang out with him. And, just another thing where it's exciting. I can't believe I know anybody or played with anybody. It just wasn't in the cards ever.
Right.
They used to, remember the thing they would have for children that were sick? It was like the Make-A-Wish thing, I mean, if you would have said, if that would have been, what's your Make-A-Wish to me, it'd probably be like, I would love to go to Jimmie Vaughan and go hang out with Jimmie Vaughan and play with him one day. And then that would be great, and I could just call it a night after that.
Right.
That's probably what my answer would have been, or Billy Gibbons, or Steve,
Right.
So, that's how much I idolized all those guys.
Isn't that amazing, though, how natural it all happened for you?
Well, it is, because, and then, yes, sometimes you wonder, you go, are you dreaming your own life, right? Like, is life a dream, and whatever you just dream this up? Is this everybody, I don't know. It is a really, I feel super fortunate all the time, and I never take it for granted, because these people they're iconic for a reason. I mean, they're genius level musicians, and to be able to be around them and see how they think and they're all completely different, but how they approach things, and it gives you great insight into how music on that level works, you know.
Yeah. Well, it also says a lot about you and the fact that what they think about you to have you by their side, doing, you know, and collaborating with you in that manner. So, you know, you really, you know, if you won't say it, I'll say it. You know, you're definitely on the same echelon as these individuals that you yourself, you know, look at as you know, musical heroes. So, you know, you're bringing the goods.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. Of course, as a person, you could never. The most you can do is to say thank you and appreciate it. But I think nobody, no matter who you are, can ever truly believe that, you know, in a way. I mean, unless maybe you get if you have a huge ego and you're really into yourself or something. But, you know, I just think I'm lucky. And obviously, yeah, you have to be they have to like what you're doing, you know. I mean, There's no two ways about it. So I'm glad that they like what I'm doing, you know. And I'm excited that allows me to play with these people.
Yeah. Well, I sure dig what you're doing, and I can't wait to see what's next.
Well, thanks, man. Well, I appreciate it, Mark. It's always great to talk to you.
Great to talk to you, and thanks so much for taking the time. I hope you have a great show tonight. And
yeah, man. Absolutely.
I'll see you in the club soon.
All right. Cool, Mark.
Thanks,
Take care, brother.
All right. Bye.
All night long, all night long, all night long, all night long, all night long.
Check out Guitar Radio Show on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Instagram, and Tumblr, and of course, on guitarradioshow.com.